Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome today to this qualifying preview for qualifying later at the 2022 Canadian Grand Prix. Hopefully you guys are doing well, and hopefully today for qualifying day you are as excited as me for what is going to be, maybe not at the front because of a penalty for a certain driver, but certainly in the midfield. It's going to be a very exciting day today. Plenty of surprises we saw in practice yesterday. And it'll be very interesting to see if those certain drivers and teams can, maintain that type of speed we saw yesterday in qualifying later. Also, rain is forecast for qualifying today. We'll see, if it does rain, we'll see how bad it is. Hopefully it's not as bad as the rain we saw on Thursday at the track. Because if it is, then there won't be any qualifying session whatsoever. Because the rain on Thursday was biblical, so let's hope it's not that bad. But yeah, it could be a very exciting day of qualifying, and what I'm going to do in this qualifying preview is obviously go through all the teams and preview how they are looking going into qualifying. Also, I'm going to look at data from practice 2 to look at how the teams are looking in all the sectors going into qualifying. Obviously, it'll be a dry the data will be from a dry practice too, so might not be too relevant to qualifying, but yeah, we'll look at it anyway. And also we'll be getting into stats regarding all of the teams, or not all of the teams, but some of the teams on the grid. And yeah, given the best preview possible for qualifying later today or tonight, wherever you may be in the world. By the way, hopefully, no matter where you are in the world, you're watching this, wherever you're watching this from, hopefully you're having the best day possible that you can be having. And also, as I've been saying for the last few streams, if I do miss your comments in chat, then make sure to post them in the comments section instead. And I will get to them probably tomorrow night, but definitely Monday night at the absolute latest. So, yeah, I will get to them soon enough if I do, unfortunately, happen to miss out on your comments in chat. But let's first get into the results of the 2 practice sessions yesterday. So in practice 1, Max Verstappen topped that session by a quarter of a second from Carlos Sainz. A pretty good gap to have in practice 1, considering how short the lap is. So yeah, very, very good start for Red Bull it was. Alonso ended up in 3rd place, Sergio Perez 4th, and then Leclerc, Russell, Stroll, Hamilton, Vettel, Ricciardo completed the top 10. And then the rest of the order was Gasly, Norris, Albon, Tsunoda, Ocon, Bottas, Zhou, Schumacher, Latifi, and Magnussen. But in terms of the very front, you can see Max Verstappen already looking very good straight out of the blocks, and he continued that in practice 2. A bit closer this time on pace to the other cars. He was only 0.08 of a second quicker than the next quickest car, Charles Leclerc, but he was still first. And yeah, Leclerc 2nd, Sainz 3rd, about 0.2 off like he was in practice 1. And then you had Sebastian Vettel in 4th place. A fantastic lap he did yesterday. And Aston Martin looked pretty quick for this weekend's Grand Prix. Alonso was 5th. He's also looking very, very good. And then the rest of the top 10 was Gasly, Russell, Norris, Ricciardo, Ocon. And then the rest of the order being Perez down in P11. I think Perez could definitely get at least into the top 5 still in qualifying later, so I don't think his pace is really anything to worry about. But yeah, it was Perez 11th, and then Stroll, Hamilton 13th. That was due to, though, them doing some setup work, or, trying some different things on setup, which is exactly what they did in Baku. And then Magnussen, Schumacher, Zhou Guanyu, Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon, Nicholas Latifi, and Valtteri Bottas. Now, before I get onto the data and properly into this stream, I do need to update about grid penalties for the race on Sunday, because it will be important to remember this for qualifying later. So Yuki Tsunoda, who ended up 17th in practice 2, he will start from the back because he's taken on, I think, a completely new power unit. So yeah, Tsunoda will start from the back. And Charles Leclerc, we heard rumours coming into this Grand Prix that Leclerc might have to take a penalty because obviously they were on the limit when it came to engine parts coming into this Grand Prix after 2 failures in Barcelona and Baku respectively. And yep, Charles Leclerc will be taking a penalty, a 10th-place grid penalty at the moment for, let me just see, yep, a new control electronics. You're only supposed to use 2 control electronic parts per season, and they've already now on their 3rd after, 9 races? So it shows you just how bad their reliability has been on the power unit side. I know Red Bull obviously have had their 2 retirements, but they weren't to do necessarily with the power unit. They were to do more so with the fuel line. So, yeah, not looking good for Ferrari. And when it comes to the fight for pole position, it is going to make it bittersweet, I guess you could say, for Ferrari and Leclerc, and F1 hoping for a exciting close fight between Max and Leclerc. But, yeah, I still think Leclerc is going to, try to get the best position he can. Maybe Ferrari will take another penalty, or, change something else in the power unit to, start at the back instead, so they can get, newer parts in and get the penalties out of the way. But to be honest, I think a 10th-place penalty is, if they're going to try and salvage anything from this weekend that could possibly cut the gap down to Verstappen in the championship, they're going to have to, I think, just take the 10th-place penalty, because, let's say Charles Leclerc does get pole position, that means he'll start 11th, and, if Verstappen has, something go bad for him in the race, or obviously has a retirement, then, Leclerc still has a good chance of taking a decent amount of points away from Max Verstappen. So, yeah, I think the best thing for Ferrari is just to take the 10th place penalty, to be honest. But I'm going to quickly, guys, you might be able to hear, I've got quite a cold at the moment. Just going to quickly blow my nose, and then I'll be back in a second. Right, that should be better for at least another few minutes. So yeah, in terms of the fight for pole position, it's, bittersweet. And I think definitely, obviously I'll get onto in a moment how I think Red Bull exactly will do with both cars, but I think Red Bull are almost guaranteed to be starting the race tomorrow on pole, given the pace that they showed in practice today, and also because of Leclerc's penalty, because with Carlos Sainz, Carlos has not had a bad weekend so far, but I just don't think Carlos is going to have the pace to really compete with Max Verstappen. Plus, I think Red Bull have a pretty good car for this weekend's Grand Prix. So, yeah, I think Verstappen in a very, very good position. But before I get onto the teams and look at, look at how they're all individually going to do, let me get into this, which is the FP2 data and all the sector times and the ideal lap. So, by the way, credit to Lights Out F1 blog. They're a very good person within the community, and make sure to go follow them on Twitter and also check out their blog on their website, as you can see on the bottom there. But yeah, I found this on Twitter, and this is the ideal lap on the far right. So the best lap F1 is able to do if they put all their best sectors together, and obviously F1's best sector 1, sector 2, and sector 3s. Well, not everyone's, but the top 10 best sector 1, sector 2, and sector 3 times. So if we start at the very front, Max Verstappen, I have to say, in sector 1, very impressive, because I thought in that sector Ferrari would be, say, half a tenth or a tenth quicker than Red Bull, like Verstappen is to the 2 Ferraris. So that is a surprise. Maybe Ferrari were, maybe concentrating with Leclerc on more of a race setup. Maybe that's why Verstappen was quicker in the first sector. But really, from Ferrari's perspective, I think in sector 1, they really have got to try and improve their speed through there, because that sector, they should be at least equal with Red Bull. They should not be half a tenth and a half slower with both cars compared to Max Verstappen. That should not be the case. Then in Sector 2, Ferrari are first and second, which is surprising because Sector 2 shouldn't suit them as much as Sector 1, but they are just about quicker than Verstappen. But, you know, if they can improve in Sector 1 Ferrari, then they've definitely got a very good chance at pole position, even with, well, maybe not with Carlos Sainz, but, you know, Charles Leclerc can still get first in qualifying today, even though he won't be able to start on pole. It's just that Sector 1 time they need to improve. Then in Sector 3, no surprise, Max Verstappen a tenth of a second quicker than the two Ferraris. And the reason that is because the Red Bull has much better straight line speed. So for the ideal lap, you know, comparing Verstappen to the two Ferraris, yeah, tenth and a half quicker than Leclerc and 0.3 quicker than Carlos Sainz. Like I said, if Ferrari can improve their car by a tenth of a second, say, in the first sector, then Leclerc would be almost equal with Verstappen on pace, and Sainz wouldn't be too far away in the second Ferrari. So I think Ferrari, like I said, in Sector 1, they have absolutely work to do with their car. Also, with Sergio Perez, not quite sure what's going on with him. So in Sector 1, he's not even in the top 10, which is a surprise. I mean, I didn't expect Perez to be, you know, up there with Verstappen, but to not even be in the top 10 in Sector 1 in practice 2, that is quite poor. And then Sector 2 it's not terrible, considering, I mean, Max is only 0.3 quicker in Sector 2, but, I mean, Sector 2 is not that complicated. I mean, it's two straights and then a couple, I'm not sure you'd call it chicanes, but two tricky corners, then a straight, and then two tricky corners, and then a straight. It's not exactly, like I said, the most complicated part of the track. And then it's Sector 3, which is just a hairpin, long straight, final chicane, straight. He's 3.5 tenths off, so I'm going to assume that Perez has a lot more pace to show. Maybe was running a different setup on his car, maybe running a bit more wing on his car. Maybe they were testing out how the car would feel with, say, a wet weather setup on a dry track. But yeah, not quite sure what was going on with Perez, but I think definitely you'll see Perez much quicker in qualifying today. I think you'll see Perez, if it is dry, I think you'll see Perez definitely be in the top 5. Maybe he won't finish in the top 4 if his pace really isn't that great, but I think he'll improve massively on what we saw yesterday in practice 2. And then quickly with the midfield, so Sebastian Vettel looking amazing in the Aston Martin, 6th in Sector 1, 4th in Sector 2 and Sector 3. And if you compare Vettel's sector times to the two top teams, the only sector really where he's losing like not a massive amount of time, but you know, enough to be a clear gap between him and a top car, is really Sector 1 and Sector 3, but he's only losing a tenth of a second in each of those sectors. Even in Sector 2, Vettel is only half a tenth slower than the two Ferraris in that sector. Now, I think Red Bull and Ferrari will pull away from the midfield cars. I don't think the midfield, you know, Vettel, Alonso, Gasly, and the rest there, I don't think they'll be able to stay as close as they were in practice 2. I think they'll probably fall away by at least, say, 0.3 of a second, maybe half a second at most. But yeah, I think it's very surprising to see Vettel so competitive in all of the sectors, and also great to see that as well. And also the same goes for Fernando Alonso. Very quick Sector 1, which is surprising. Sector 2 is Not as great as I expected. Probably Alonso should be, considering Vettel is where he is. Alonso should probably be about a tenth of a second quicker in Sector 2. And then Sector 3, also a bit of a surprise that Alpine are not quicker in Sector 3. So I think Alonso probably has more pace in that car. Maybe has more pace available to him than Vettel does. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what Alonso and Vettel do in qualifying. But I think definitely both of those drivers will be in the top 10 in Q3, even if it's wet, because obviously they're both very, very good in the wet. Pierre Gasly as well, looking pretty good. Really, the pace for the AlphaTauri is coming in that final sector. In Sector 1 and Sector 2, it's not great, the pace from them, but, it's not too bad. And then for Mercedes, Sector 1 is pretty much... Alonso and Vettel quicker in Sector 1. I know that's still quite poor for them, but they're not miles behind those two drivers in the first sector. So, Sector 1 for me is absolutely fine. For Mercedes, it's Sector 2 and Sector 3, where Mercedes are losing just a bit too much lap time. Russell, 0.3 of a second off the two Ferraris in Sector 2. Really, he should be losing, say, a tenth and a half, I would say, in Sector 2, not 0.3 of a second. So, yeah, if he was a tenth and a half quicker in that sector, then he would be splitting, I think, or maybe just ahead of Daniel Ricciardo there. And then Sector 3, I know the Mercedes is porpoising a bit, but to be losing 0.4 of a second in Sector 3, that is absolutely monumental and just not good enough. They need to be at least 0.2 of a second, or maybe not even 0.2 of a second, at least a tenth and a half quicker in that sector. So Mercedes, for the ideal lap, they're 0.9 of a second off. Really, they should be the ideal lap, say, 0.6 of a second off, which would be... considering they are still miles behind Ferrari and Red Bull, that would be pretty good for them to only be 0.6 off, considering how slow they were in Baku compared to Ferrari and Red Bull. So, yeah, Mercedes, I think overall you can see that in all of the sectors, they are lacking in pretty much every area. Still not enough downforce, too much porpoising, rear downforce is quite poor at the minute, and their straight line speed, because of the porpoising, is pretty bad. So, yeah, not great there. And the final team I'll just quickly get into is McLaren, because I think McLaren really did prove, again, like we saw in Baku, McLaren proved that in the sectors on, certain tracks where there are, say more corners than power sections, McLaren are very quick. Lando Norris quicker than both Ferraris in Sector 1. That is a massive surprise, and to be honest, I think it does show that McLaren, they do have the potential to have a good car. They just don't have any straight line speed whatsoever. Sector 2, surprisingly, Norris didn't get in the top 10 in Sector 2, but yeah, Sector 1, that was an incredible Sector 1 from him. Daniel Ricciardo, though, did a pretty good Sector 2, ending up in 5th place in that sector. But Sector 3, you can see, nowhere to be seen. I don't know exactly where they were, but not even in the top 10. So they were at best half a second slower in Sector 3. But, let's say, for example, so in Sector 1, they're half a tenth off, and then they're a tenth and a half off Verstappen in Sector 2. So after the first two sectors, they're only 0.2 of a second slower than Max Verstappen. That's very good. If they were matching Verstappen in Sector 3, then McLaren, because of Leclerc's penalty, McLaren could probably get a podium this weekend. That just, again, it shows you how much pace they're losing because of the lack of straight line speed, and how much potential they do have. They have a lot of potential in that car. They just can't unlock it because they are just so dramatically slow in a straight line. And you can see with the ideal lap there, both cars in the top 10, 0.9 off. But if they were, about half a second quicker in the final sector, then, yeah, they would be, I think, strong-ish contenders for a podium this weekend McLaren, I think I've got to be not the most disappointing team this season, but what's the best way of describing it? The most frustrating team on the grid, because there is so much potential in that car, yet something that other teams are coming by a lot more simpler, they just can't have. It's really frustrating because, like we see in Sector 1 and Sector 2, they're very competitive. It's really frustrating. If McLaren had the straight line speed that Red Bull have, for example, then McLaren would probably be, well, maybe not third in the Constructors' Championship, but they wouldn't be far behind, and they would have had probably a couple more podiums this season. So, yeah, very frustrating for them. But it does look as though, in the dry, that Red Bull have the best car, then Ferrari, and then the third quickest car. You'd probably have to say Aston Martin or Alpine at the minute. I mean, Mercedes, I think, will improve, but I'm not sure they're going to improve enough to be the third best team in qualifying. So I'd probably say Aston Martin, Alpine, Mercedes for third to fifth. And then after that, you've got, say, McLaren and AlphaTauri, 6th and 7th. So, yeah, looking very competitive in the midfield. And if it is dry, I think, the top three is probably going to be, like it is for the ideal lap on the far right, Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz. But from 4th place down, it is going to be very competitive. That is for sure in qualifying later today. But I think now I will go on to the teams. And let's start with Red Bull Racing. And like I said, I think they've got pretty much the best car this weekend. In the dry, the race is expected tomorrow to be dry. So looking good for them from that perspective with Leclerc, having his penalty. If it does rain, though, it does give Carlos Sainz, who obviously can go for pole position and doesn't have a penalty, does give him in the Ferrari a good opportunity because, in theory, in the wet, Carlos and the Ferrari car should be a better wet weather car because Red Bull won't be able to utilise their straight line speed as well in the wet. So if it does rain, it might be a bit trickier than expected. But then again, Max Verstappen is an absolute god in the wet. He's not I wouldn't say he's probably the best driver in the wet on the grid. I think that goes to a certain 7-time world champion. But yeah, in the wet, compared to Leclerc and Sainz, I think Verstappen is absolutely the best out of those drivers. And I think Verstappen probably has about a 90% chance of pole position today, dry or wet. If he keeps up what we saw yesterday, I think it's going to take a monumental effort from Carlos Sainz or Leclerc to get pole position, even though Leclerc won't be able to start on pole. It's going to take a monumental effort because Red Bull looking very good. They're supremely confident because they've won 5 races in a row, and they're on an absolute roll at the minute. It's very reminiscent of the their dominant days back in 2011, 2013, and the other years as well. So yeah, looking great for Red Bull. For Sergio Perez, like I said, I think he will improve, and I think he'll probably, Perez, end up in the top 5. Maybe not 4th, because, the upper midfield is looking very competitive this weekend, but I think Perez will still be in the top 5. And with Leclerc's penalty, Sergio Perez's job now this weekend essentially is to hold up Charles Leclerc from getting any higher up the field. And if he can prevent Leclerc from getting a podium in tomorrow's race, Perez, then that is job done, not just for this race, but really for the World Championship, because if Verstappen was to win and Leclerc finish in 4th, then I think the championship is absolutely dead and buried at that point. So, yeah, as long as Verstappen gets pole or, qualifies 2nd with Leclerc 1st, then that is good enough. And, Red Bull, I think, will be absolutely fine. And definitely, they are the team to beat. Now we'll go on to... Actually, wait, hold on. Before we go on to Ferrari, let me quickly... almost forgot. Let me go on to a qualifying stat for the Red Bull team. So Red Bull's last pole position in Canada was in 2013 with Sebastian Vettel. That weekend he got pole actually in the wet, so could be a similar weekend for Verstappen and Red Bull here. And in the race, Vettel won by, I think, 16 or 17 seconds. It was a dominant win by the German. Max's best qualifying result in Canada is third from 2018. This race, actually, 4 years ago, is the race that turned his career around, because in that 2018 season, the races before Canada, the 6 races before, at the start of that season, he was in a bit of a crisis because he was putting himself in great positions, but having silly accidents and costing himself great results. So yeah, this result 4 years ago was the very start of what we're seeing now, of him becoming, you know, the driver that he was always hoped that he would, you know, become. As also, Red Bull have taken pole in Canada 3 times since 2010. All of them have been with Sebastian Vettel in 2011, 2012, and 2013. So it's been a decade since they've had success here in qualifying, but looking very good this weekend. Also, we do have to remember, with Red Bull, they haven't really had a car since 2013 that could get pole position here in Canada. So yeah, that's why it's been a bit of a barren run for them in qualifying. And now we will go on to Ferrari. And yeah, coming into this Grand Prix, I mean, with Leclerc's penalty, unless something happens to Verstappen tomorrow, it's really not looking good for the championship. I'll, you know, reserve judgment in terms of whether the championship is over or not until tomorrow, because, you know, we don't know what could happen with Verstappen. Verstappen could retire, could crash, and Leclerc could come through and get second and third, or second or third, and that could end up giving him enough points to get right back into the title race. But if Verstappen does win the Grand Prix this weekend, then yeah, I think Ferrari are in a position that they can't really fight back from in the championship. But in regards to qualifying, yeah, Leclerc just has to get, you know, best position he can so he can start as high as possible. And with Carlos Sainz, yeah, I think if Carlos is going to get pole and do the best job he can for Leclerc and for Ferrari for the championship, then Carlos has to get pole position. If he doesn't get pole position, then I think Sainz absolutely has no chance of really fighting Verstappen for the victory, because I think Max is a much stronger race driver than Carlos is. So yeah, looking very bad for the Ferrari team. Maybe if it does rain, Verstappen makes a mistake and crashes, and, you know, ends up Verstappen starting much lower on the grid. That would be great for them, but they are pretty much at the point now, Ferrari, where they've got to hope that something goes wrong for Red Bull, because if Red Bull can execute this weekend perfectly, or near perfectly, then I think Ferrari's championship hopes will be dead by the end of this weekend. So yeah, not looking great. I mean, at worst, Ferrari in qualifying should be second and third. Can they get first? Most likely not. Like I said, I think Verstappen has a very, very good chance today, because I think Red Bull have the better car and the best car. And yeah, I just think they're just too good at the moment. And Ferrari have completely fallen off the wagon. But coming into qualifying, here are some stats regarding the Ferrari team. So at the last Canadian Grand Prix here in 2019, Ferrari did actually take pole position with Sebastian Vettel. And actually, the last 2 Canadian Grand Prix in 2018 and 2019, Ferrari have been on pole position both times with Sebastian Vettel. Charles Leclerc's best qualifying result in Canada is third from 2019. He's only raced here twice, so not great history around this track compared to other tracks on the calendar. And Ferrari have taken pole in Canada twice since 2010. Like I said, 2018 and 2019 it was with Sebastian Vettel. So in terms of recent history, it looks good for Ferrari, but yeah, Red Bull, I think for this weekend, definitely looking like the better team. Let me know, guys, in the chat, what chances do Ferrari have, not just in qualifying today, but this weekend? Let me know what their chances really are. And I'll make sure to read out as many comments as I can in a few moments' time, as we're now going to move on to the Mercedes team, who, I mean, I didn't really expect them to be that quick this weekend, to be honest, so them being where they were in practice 2 was not necessarily a surprise. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement, even just for this weekend. If they can try and run the car with a bit less drag in some way, shape or form, then I think Mercedes could end up getting a decent result and maybe putting themselves in a decent position for a possible podium tomorrow. So yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think Mercedes, I think they'll be better today. I don't think they'll be, what were they in practice? 2, was it 6th or 7th and 13th, I think, with both cars. I don't think it'll be that bad. Lewis Hamilton will definitely improve, and I think they'll probably put a setup on his car that is not experimental and that is, a good setup for him and for qualifying and for the race. So I think it'll be much better today. And yeah, I think most likely Russell will... I'm not sure if he'll be the quickest Mercedes driver, because obviously Lewis Hamilton, we know how great he is here in Canada. But yeah, I think with both Mercedes, I think they'll both be in the top 10 for sure. And at best, I think it'll be probably a 5th and a 7th, or a 5th and an 8th. Pretty much what we saw in Baku. I'd be surprised if Mercedes could get, a 4th and a 5th, for example, in qualifying. Even though if they did get that, that would be a very good result, and that's ideally what they need to try and get, because, with Leclerc's penalty, Mercedes, I mean, they would be under massive threat, obviously, from Leclerc in the race to hold on to podium position, but we've seen, Hamilton and Russell be able to defend their positions on track this season pretty well, so, they would have a decent chance of being able to hold on. So hopefully for Mercedes, they can get, say, the front 2 positions in the midfield pack. The top 3, maybe top 4 if Perez does improve is going to be kind of locked out for them. So yeah, Mercedes, damage limitation as every Grand Prix pretty much, except for the Spanish Grand Prix and Australian Grand Prix has been this season. They need, damage limitation this weekend, and hopefully they can get a result that is somewhat decent for the race. To be honest though, with possible rain coming or being here for this qualifying session, if it does rain, that would probably be Mercedes' dream, because the car would probably bounce less in the wet, I'd imagine, and also slow down the corners a bit, or slow down those fast corners where they're suffering the porpoising as well, especially on the exit of those corners. So it'd probably make those issues less so. And I think you'd probably see Mercedes a bit more competitive in wet conditions rather than the race itself. By the way, Mercedes' race pace didn't look too bad. Wasn't amazing, but it didn't look too bad. But yeah, it's just their qualifying or single lap pace is a bit wonky at the minute for the Silver Arrows. But yeah, hopefully a good result for them in this session. I think, like I said, I certainly think they'll get a 5th or a 6th at best with whoever the main Mercedes car is. The other Mercedes car, though, might be stuck in the pack with some very competitive drivers and cars. Let's go on to Mercedes now, and their stats going into qualifying. Their last pole position in Canada was in 2017 with Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, they're not going to fight for pole today, but just to illustrate how good they've been here in the past, Lewis Hamilton, also great at this Grand Prix. He's had 6 pole positions at the Canadian Grand Prix. His first ever pole position in Formula 1 was here in Canada as well in 2007. Also had pole here in 2008, 2010, 2015, 2016 and 2017 as well. So 3 poles for McLaren he had, and 3 for Mercedes. So yeah, it's always been great around this track. It's not the best track on the calendar for him, that's the Hungaroring, but yeah, pretty great track for him. And Mercedes have taken pole in Canada 4 times since 2010, from 2014 to 2017, those pole positions were, and they locked out, I think, the front row in all of those qualifying sessions except for 2017. But yeah, despite not having the best car, they do have a very good record here. So yeah, hopefully for them, they can show a bit more pace in this session. And now, before we go on to you guys in the chat and your comments, I'm going to quickly move on to McLaren. And McLaren, yeah, in Sector 1 and Sector 2, as I showed, they look pretty good. But in Sector 3, they are absolutely miles away. I would be curious to find out from McLaren, like, what the exact problem is. Whether it is too much drag and whether they actually can't cut it off for certain reasons, or they're afraid to because of certain reasons. But yeah, as I've said many times in the last few weeks, if only they had good straight line speed, or the straight line speed they had last year, the McLaren would be probably quite clearly the 3rd quickest team this weekend and would probably have a decent chance of a podium. But yeah, at the minute, all they look as though they're going to have is maybe a Q3 with one of their cars. I don't think, by the way, because I think they were, 8th and 9th in practice too, I don't think they'll be that competitive in qualifying. If it's wet, though, and they'll be praying for the rain, trust me, with the car they have, if it does rain, I think McLaren could get a very good result. Both drivers, we know, are very good in the wet, and the McLaren car should be pretty good in the wet as well, and should limit their straight line speed disadvantage. So yeah, they'll be praying for the wet to come, or the wet weather to come today. But if it is dry, I think they'll probably get a car into the top 10, say probably Lando Norris, just about sneaking in to, say, 9th, maybe 8th at the absolute best. But yeah, most likely it'll be the final couple positions in Q3. And then Daniel Ricciardo, let's say if he is the slower McLaren driver, he'll probably end up getting knocked out in, say, 11th, 12th, maybe 13th at the absolute worst. But McLaren, like I've said, they've got a good car. They just don't have the straight line speed. So let's hope for them that the weather plays into their hands. Because if it does, I mean, we saw in Baku their race pace was pretty good. So we know that with McLaren, that, you know, if they can get a good qualifying result, then there is a good race result also on the cards for them. Hopefully, they get a decent qualifying result. And hopefully, like I said, from their perspective, it does rain. Hopefully, whether it's some point this season or next year, hopefully McLaren could at least show 2 to 3 tenths of a second more speed in say, parts of racetracks where, you know, it's flat out. Hopefully they can do that, because yeah, it's getting really frustrating now and quite boring to be mentioning it over and over again, but it's so obvious, you know, why they're still not that great. And it's, yeah, so frustrating. Like I said, most frustrating team on the current F1 grid. But guys, let me know in the live chat for the top teams, you know, what do you think is going to happen between Red Bull and Ferrari today, dry or wet? And for Mercedes and McLaren, let me know, how do you think they'll get on, dry or wet? And I'll make sure to read out your comments in just a moment. Just want to say, don't forget, guys, to come along to my watch-alongs later tonight. I'm doing a Practice 3 watch-along in 2 hours exactly from now at 5:45 p.m. UK time. Yeah, that's the Practice 3 watch-along. And then the qualifying watch-along is at 8:30 p.m. UK time. So make sure to come along for those streams later today. And as well, I'll be live twice tomorrow. Firstly, for a race preview at 4 p.m. UK time, and the race watch-along then will be at 6:30 p.m. UK time. And the race watch-along, by the way, will go on a bit longer than normal. Hopefully, not because of a red flag, but the reason is because I'm going to be doing the race reaction, also a part of the race watch-along. The only reason is because we'll be going pretty late into the evening, and I don't want to leave it too late to do my race reaction. So that's what I'm going to do with that. So yeah, make sure to come along for that content coming up later this weekend. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And for everyone watching, don't forget to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And as well, follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 and make sure to join the Discord as well. There's a link below in the description box, and I'll just quickly show some of the pictures again. Right, let's get into some comments. By the way, great to see so many of you here. Just over 400 of you here. Great to see so many of you. And hello to everyone in chat. Hopefully you're all doing well. John Hawkins says the rain sorts the men for the boys. It does. Hey man, just saying hi from Tokyo, Japan. Hope it rains. I don't think I've had many viewers from Asia, so yeah, great to have you along. Let's see if I can find some comments in regards to qualifying today. Bruce Segal says, kind of nice having races / qualifying on at somewhat normal times here in North America. Yeah, it's obviously great for you guys in North America for the Canadian Grand Prix. Yeah, I mean, it depends, doesn't it, where you live in North America as to whether, or you know, the timings of the sessions or, you know, qualifying and race times, whether it's at a bad time for you. Obviously, Baku would have been at a bad time even if you were living on the East Coast of, say, America, or, you know, on Eastern time. But, you know, the Grand Prix coming up after this, like the British Grand Prix, I think will be on at like mid-morning, like 10 a.m. for people on the East Coast. So, yeah, it's not on a bad time. But yeah, definitely this Grand Prix on at a very good time for the North American viewers. And yeah, hopefully we get a Canadian Grand Prix, because obviously we haven't been here in 3 years. Hopefully we get a Grand Prix here in Canada that can be reminiscent of some classic Canadian Grand Prix from the past. Bruce Segal also says, wonder if Ferrari will change his turbo this race or next. I mean, they may as well, I think, change it for this one. Because, I mean, if you change it, I mean, they've already, I think, unless Max Verstappen has a serious problem in the race tomorrow, they've already cost themselves the Grand Prix this weekend. They've already lost, effectively. If they then take a new turbo at Silverstone and take another penalty, they've then lost another Grand Prix. So you may as well just lose this one to give yourself a good chance at Silverstone, rather than lose, or pretty much guarantee yourself to lose, 2 races in a row. So if I was Ferrari, I mean, considering the position they're in, they need to hope for Verstappen to have a major problem anyway, so they may as well just take on a completely new power unit and start afresh, basically. Yeah, maybe they'll do that. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But that's what I would do if I was them, because I don't see the point in then costing yourself another win at Silverstone that, you never know, they could get. I mean, the track, they're going to be pretty good there at Silverstone. So, yeah. I don't think it's worth them taking a new turbo at Silverstone. Bless you, Chazza. Thank you for that, John. Ferrari fastest car easily in qualifying. That's obviously from Jan Sargent, who is a pretty ardent Ferrari fan. Where's Pedro Gasasio? That's yeah, I know what you're talking about there with Pierre Gasly. Apparently that's what his name is in the Spanish newspapers. That's from KG, that comment. Dane asks, hey Chaz, question, if it is raining for qualifying, do you think Fernando Alonso can get pole? No, I don't think he can. I think he could get, though, a top 5, maybe even a top 4 in qualifying. Same with Sebastian Vettel as well, because the last time it rained in qualifying here, Vettel actually got pole for Red Bull. So yeah, he could get a top 5, top 4 pole position. I think that would be a bit too far for him. If he does get pole, though, here in Canada, in the wet, that would probably be his best pole position of his entire career. Because if you look at the pole positions he's had in his career, they've all been in cars fighting for wins. They've never... I don't think he's had a pole position in a midfield car. I mean, you could arguably say 2009, he got pole in Hungary, but those were back in the refueling days where you could, start or, qualify with a lot less fuel than other people deliberately to get a good position. So, and that's what they did actually in that race. So, yeah, I think if he got pole today in the wet, that would be probably the best pole position of his career. And then he would have to pray then for rain in the race to get the win. KG says, last time they raced it, I put like $120 on Vettel to win the race. I was looking to win like $600 or something like that. Yeah, obviously. The last Canadian Grand Prix was a very controversial one. I remember I definitely caused a bit of a stir with my video the day after the race, explaining why I thought Vettel did not deserve a penalty. And I think the like to dislike was like 50-50. And yeah, definitely people split down the middle on it. Let's see if we can find some other comments here. By the way, hello to Mclaren F1 Race. Simon Cragland. Good to see you, by the way. I've not seen you here in a while. Obviously, you used to be here all the time back in the 2018, 2019 days. Says, Verstappen probably had one of his best Fridays ever yesterday. Verstappen is a big favourite for this weekend. I'd be surprised if he didn't win. I'd have to pretty much agree, I think. Sorry. Bloody hell, big gas bro there. What do you call it? With Verstappen, yeah, because of Leclerc's penalty, it'd be very surprising if Max wasn't able to win this weekend. It'd be very surprising indeed. And like I said, coming into the Grand Prix, if Max does win, then I think the championship is all wrapped up. So, yeah, not looking great for the rest of the season in terms of an exciting championship battle. But maybe if Verstappen wins this weekend and Leclerc finishes 4th or 3rd and pulls the gap out to almost 50 points, maybe that'll take the pressure off Ferrari and maybe they'll start performing better. Wouldn't be surprised at all if that happened, by the way, because I think they definitely react, or not react. I think they get on better with less pressure to Ferrari. I think we've seen that quite a few times over the years where, when the pressure of a championship fight is took off, they tend to perform a bit stronger. Anyway, let's find some more comments here. I'll move these pictures on to Ferrari. Mike Hauser says, Charles, grid penalty means Max wins. Yeah, most likely. Dane says, yes, the Mercedes car is shit. Absolutely. Laszlo says Max win for sure. Simon Cragland says Leclerc should be happy if he ends up on the podium, but it will not be easy for him to finish ahead of Checo. Exactly. I mean, as well, the problem with Ferrari is because they're already looking probably the second quickest car, it means that Leclerc getting onto the podium is not a done, settled thing. When if Leclerc, say if Ferrari had a car like they had back in Melbourne, where they were clearly miles quicker than Red Bull and everyone else, then a Leclerc podium with a 10th-place grid penalty would be pretty likely. Waleed says, Leclerc is starting from the pits, taking 2 power unit penalties. Let me quickly look on Twitter to see if that's true. If my Twitter will ever load. Just seeing that apparently Franz Tost has confirmed that Pierre Gasly will race for AlphaTauri in 2023 and says it's 100% confirmed. So for any Gasly fans out there you go. I think Gasly, though, has a contract until... Yeah, he has a contract until 2020, or the end of 2023 anyway, so it's not really a surprise, that news. If Gasly's going to leave AlphaTauri, or the Red Bull program, It's not going to be till 2024, most likely. I can't see anything about Leclerc taking another engine penalty, but to be honest, if it was announced, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever by that. I was saying Alfa Romeo and Haas broke the curfew last night. You get 2 exceptions for the curfew, so they're not going to take any fines or penalties. Apparently at the track at the minute, it's not wet, but it's like drizzly and cold in Montreal. So, yeah, so we're heading for something storm-wise. But, yeah, can't see anything in regards to Leclerc taking another penalty. I think Leclerc will minimum P4, P5 in the race, says SHT in chat. McLaren F1 race is embarrassing that a lot of cars in the crucible of motorsport Formula 1 are bouncing around like space hoppers. I mean, this was always, I think, expected to be a problem in this era with now ground effect back. It was always expected to be a problem. I'm pretty sure it was a problem when ground effect was in F1 in the late 70s and early 1980s as well. So, I mean, I'll have to obviously do more research to see whether that is indeed the case, that it was a massive problem back then. But, yeah. Let's see if I can find some other comments here. Make sure to keep putting them in the chat, guys, and I'll make sure to read them out. Bruce Segal says, Ferrari was super porpoising as opposed to bouncing. Toto's headphones must be taking a real beating this season, says John Hawkins. Let's see if I can find some other comments here. Adan Joseph asks, have they started the qualifying race? If you mean qualifying, no, it doesn't start until 9 o'clock this evening, which is in about 5 hours from now. Dane says, really, that's laughable what you say that Hamilton can't drive in the wet. He's not talking about me, by the way. He's talking about someone else. I think it's someone called Klaus who says Hamilton can't drive in the rain, which is, yeah, must be a joke because he's clearly, I think, the best on the grid for wet weather driving. So hopefully for him, it does rain. Waleed says, Leclerc will start from the back of the grid. Most Italian journos have confirmed this already. Well, we haven't heard anything official, and until we hear anything official, I'm not going to, you know, make claims until, like I said, they're official. But like I said, I've seen those rumors already, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he did start from the back of the grid. It would make more sense to start from the back of the grid this weekend rather than take another 10-place penalty at Silverstone. Let's see if I can find some other comments here. Music Monster Man says, Chazza, what's up, my brother? Yeah, going well. Hopefully going well for you. Josiah, great to see you. Says, Hamilton can't compete in this absolute pony car, and it's a disgrace. This is the greatest driver to ever grace the sport, and he has to put up with what is a lump of mashed potatoes and a petit filou, I think that says. Yeah, it is. It is. And it's such a shame, because I think this season, I know people will sit there and say, oh, the new regulations haven't worked. We haven't, you know, they can't overtake that well, and we haven't had that great a season so far. The big reason behind that is 2 things. Actually, yeah, 2 big reasons. One, Ferrari have gone into just complete bottle mode in the last few races and have ended up blowing the championship almost to Red Bull, to the point where it seems as though Red Bull are pretty certainly going to win the championship. That's not helped, because at least with a close championship fight, it makes things more exciting with, you know, more at stake. But if Mercedes were right up there with Ferrari and Red Bull, which I thought they would be by now, and I thought they would be this season, then every Grand Prix, it would be a pretty, you know, competitive fight up there. But because Mercedes is so far behind, it's either pretty much Verstappen or Leclerc for pole or victory. I know Perez has had, you know, a pole this season. and won, obviously, in Monaco. But it's not, it's not F1's fault. It's Mercedes and Ferrari's fault, I think, as to why we've had, not a great start to the season. But yeah, with Lewis Hamilton, it is such a shame. Yeah, it's a massive shame for him. I mean, I still think he can get some good results this season. I still think this weekend he can get still a great result, because if it does rain in qualifying and he can, have a setup for this weekend that is a bit more comfortable, especially on the rear end, I have no doubt that Lewis Hamilton can still end up getting like a 5th place in qualifying. And if Leclerc does start from the back, then Lewis could absolutely get a podium this weekend. Especially if Sergio Perez is struggling for pace in qualifying, which, we'll see in qualifying whether he actually is struggling for pace or whether he, is doing something else on setup work in practice. But, I still believe Lewis Hamilton can get some great results this season. But at the minute, Mercedes, not great. But at the next Grand Prix, I believe Mercedes are going to bring an upgrade. And also, the next circuit on the calendar should suit their car a lot better. Because it's smoother, Silverstone, not as bouncy, anywhere near as bouncy as Baku, Canada, Monaco. They should be a lot stronger there. And also, we have at Silverstone, every corner except for like 2 or 3 are fast corners. And they definitely are stronger in the fast corners. So, I think Mercedes will be next Grand Prix pretty competitive. Will they be able to win? Probably not, but yeah, I think Mercedes, they've still got a chance of some decent results considering the lack of pace they do have this season. Let's see if I can find some other comments here quick. Simon Cragland says, Ferrari has just not learned from 2017-2018. I thought they had, but they proved they still haven't. Yeah, well, the reason is because fundamentally the personnel is not really that much different. I mean, Binotto, he was a main figure in the team in those years. I mean, he wasn't the team boss, but he was still, I think was he the technical director? And then obviously became team boss in 2019 and oversaw what was an absolute embarrassing 2019 season and a very embarrassing 2020 season. And he stood at the team, and I still think under his leadership, Ferrari are never going to win a world championship. And what do you call it? With, when it comes to strategy, Inaki Rueda, still there. I don't understand why that guy is head of strategy. I don't understand what what he's done to, by the way, I've just noticed I've got an incorrect stat on the bottom ticker. Let me just change that. Red Bull's last win was not with Sebastian Vettel, it was with Daniel Ricciardo. What do you call it? Yeah, I don't understand how Inaki Rueda is still the head of strategy. He must have sucked a lot of you-know-what to get that job. But, yeah, if you keep rewarding failure, this is what happens. You get more failure. So, yeah, it's not a surprise, really, that Ferrari are still in this position. They still, I think, are a bit too Italian in their approach to, personnel and the personnel they hire. I mean, I don't have a problem with Italian mechanics or, F1 personnel. It's just, I think this is the case for any F1 team. If you almost entirely hire from a certain country, you're not going to have the best talent pool you could, probably find. So, yeah, I don't think that's a great, strategy, I guess you could say, from Ferrari. But yeah, pretty much, if you look at personnel, their team is pretty much the same as it was back then, except for a couple key people that have gone. Yeah, and it's not a surprise, like I said, that they're still making the same fundamental mistakes. Stella Pay says Mercedes needs spies that could steal some designs from Red Bull. Hamilton just needs a car that doesn't porpoise. Yeah. I mean, if they could not fix it, but if they can solve that to a certain degree, then Mercedes will at least be able to be, third best team, which they are still kind of to a certain degree, but it's been a bit tough for them in the last couple of races. Looney Tunes asks, why is there an engine penalty? It's because Leclerc has a new control electronics fitted and he's exceeded the amount of parts for that you're allowed to use. Bruce Segal says, I'll walk outside and send weather report. Thanks for that. Nick says, are the rumours true that Leclerc won't run in qualies and get a 4th power unit and start from P20? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we'll find out. If that is the case, we'll find out probably within the next 3 hours if that is the case. Let's see if there's any other comments I can find here. Simon Cragland says, I'm a Hamilton fan, and I think Hamilton has won his last championship, unfortunately, as I think he'll stop his career after the 2023 season. I hope that is not the case. I really hope that's not the case. Because, you know, I mean, people may sit there and think, oh, but, you know, I'd like to see, you know, new generation of drivers come about and then fight for championships now. But Lewis Hamilton, you know, being the driver he is, we need that quality on the grid. I mean, I still believe Mercedes next season will bounce back. I think they'll at least next season have a championship contending car. I just think they've, as you know, the personnel they've got, I just think they're too good to be this bad next season as well. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, yeah, I think Mercedes will be back next year. And I think if they're back enough to the point where they can possibly win the championship, then I think Lewis will probably sign another contract for maybe another year or two. Because I think he's only going to stay in F1, Lewis, if he's still able to win championships, because that's what he wants to do, obviously, and that's what he deserves, a championship-winning machine. I'll go on to these pictures of McLaren. Let's see. We'll find some of the good comments here. Alphabet Cat says, Red Bull are the favourites unless Ferrari throw everything into Leclerc. It's a shame, as I did think that by the last third of the season, that I did think Mercedes would have fixed their car. Yeah, it is disappointing, but I mean, they've still got time. I think they'll, because of Leclerc's penalty and the possibility of rain today, I still think they could get a pretty good result out of the overall weekend. But yeah, I mean, really, I think maybe at Silverstone we'll see Mercedes possibly contend for a podium on pure pace, but if they're going to start really contending for victories this season, it's probably not going to be until the final 3 or 4 races, unfortunately. Let's see if there's any more comments I can read out quick. Leap says, fun fact, in every season Hamilton has competed and he has won a race. This could be the season that breaks the record. Yep, true. That could be. This could be the season where that record disappears, and it would be a shame because it is a fantastic record to have, and I think further proves that, you know, why I think he is the greatest of all time. As Ruben MC asks, is the Aston Martin pace genuine? I think it is, because normally on a Friday they don't tend to be that quick, Aston Martin, but then on a Saturday tend to improve based on what they've done on a Friday. So I think the pace is genuine. I think Sebastian Vettel 100%, dry or wet, will be in the top 10. With Lance Stroll, obviously, we know he's not great in qualifying. We'll have to see what he does. But I think the pace is definitely there. Let's see if I can find anything else here. De Regara says, there's every chance that Mercedes could be second in the Constructors' title this season, dare I say, because of their consistency. Kind of like Ferrari in 2012. I mean, yeah, if Ferrari do start to fall off a cliff even more, and Mercedes can improve their car, then it is possible, because reminder, Mercedes are only 27 points behind, I think. Is it 27 points or 30 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship? So it is possible if they improve their car. Joseph Gomez asks, is there a permanent fix to the porpoising? I mean, every team has it, so no, not necessarily. But I think this is why I don't think Mercedes really this season are going to be consistently competitive. Maybe like we saw glimpses in Barcelona and in Melbourne to a certain extent. I think the reason the Mercedes car porpoises as badly as it does and is as badly designed as it is I think purely the concept of the car, the design concept. And that's why I think next year they will improve massively, because I think what they'll do is they'll probably scrap this concept. I cannot see for the life of me them coming into next season with this concept that they've gone for. I think what they'll probably do is study the teams that suffer a lot less with it, such as Red Bull, and see how they're able to limit it. And maybe Mercedes will turn up next season with a car that looks not identical to the Red Bull, but definitely a lot like the Red Bull to limit the porpoising. Maybe that will happen next season. But I think the way Mercedes will fix it next season is by probably just, starting all over again, I guess you could say. Hold on. Bruce Segal said, what time does qualifying start for Canadian Grand Prix? 4 p.m. local time and 9 p.m. BST. Yeah. Absolutely bang on there. Let's see if I can find any final comments here before we get to the midfield teams. Darth Snarf, that's a good name, says they'll probably go active suspension to fix porpoising, but that won't happen for a year or two at least. It's a fundamental problem with the designs of some cars, so it's not easy fix. I don't think they'll bring active suspension in. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what they're going to do, I mean, they've brought this technical directive in. This technical directive, by the way, is not for this weekend. They're only announcing it for now so they can measure what the cars are doing in terms of their bouncing this weekend, so they can come up with a good metric for the British Grand Prix on. But I don't think they'll bring active suspension, and the reason is because I think it'll make things too easy in terms of the way the cars handle around the track. And secondly, I think by 2023, I think definitely almost all of the teams would have solved porpoising to a good extent. Nick says, do you think we are witnessing the start of a Verstappen dynasty? Depends what you mean by a dynasty. If you mean like 3-4 championships in the space of 5 years, then yeah, I'd say we are. I think definitely this season, I think he'll win the championship. I think Ferrari at the minute, they are clinging on by a fingernail at the minute to their hopes. And I think, he's got a very good chance. Obviously, the next set of regulations will come in 2026, which will see Audi and Porsche come in. Between now and then, you've got, obviously, this season, 2023, 2024, 2025. I think definitely in 2 of the next 3 seasons after this one, he has an extremely good chance of winning the championship. So, yeah, I think Max is absolutely heading for possibly a dynasty, and possibly by 2028, when his contract is up at Red Bull, I think absolutely he could be on 4 or 5 world championships by then. And, the rumour with Red Bull is that Porsche are going to be supplying them with engines from 2026 on, so we'll see what happens with that. Morning, by the way, to Faith Thomas. Let me see if I can find a couple final comments, and then we'll go on to the midfield. Gold Soup asks, what's with Yuki? He has an engine penalty for this weekend, and he'll start from the back no matter what. I think he'll start 20th. If Leclerc does start at the back as well, he'll start 19th, I'm pretty sure. Rotten Bastard says, I wonder if Mercedes' design was to try and create as much outwash from the aero like last year, or causing passing to be difficult. I I mean, to be honest, I haven't looked into their design well enough to know what exactly they were trying to accomplish. I mean, I'm probably going to do, I think, at some point later this year. I mean, I did do a stream on June the 1st, I think it was, that you can go back and watch, by the way, if you want to, say in between this stream and the next one. And it was a stream about how, why Mercedes have already lost the championship and why they've, designed their worst car in a decade. But it was really just looking at the season so far, mostly in terms of results. And I did cover the porpoising, but I didn't cover it in... I did cover it in decent detail, but the other things I didn't cover in massive detail. So I think later this year I'm probably going to cover the technical aspect of the Mercedes car in a bit more detail. I'm hoping, by the way, talking about content, I'm hoping to be doing recorded videos again soon. I'm still going to be doing mostly live streams, so don't worry about that. But I am probably going to be purchasing Sony Vegas Pro, hopefully in the next month or so. So yeah, hopefully I'll get some recorded videos back on the channel, and hopefully they'll be of better quality. And yeah, also, because obviously last year on the channel I didn't do any summer break content. This year there will be content in the summer break. I've got, at the minute, I've got 5 videos planned. I know a couple of the topics already. The other 3 though, still haven't quite decided yet. But yeah, I've already got a plan for the summer break. And with Mercedes, maybe I'll do a video on them on the summer break, or maybe I'll do it at the end of the season, who knows. I'll read out this comment and then we'll go to the midfield teams. Rocket Pencil asks, I didn't know Sebastian Vettel and Lando Norris was gay. It true? No. I mean, I know there's lots of fan fiction online about the AlphaTauri drivers, but no, I don't believe that's true. I mean, if it was, then, great for them, but yeah, I don't believe that's true. I mean, I'd really hope for Sebastian Vettel's wife it's not true, because that would be pretty painful if that was the case. Anyway, let's move on to the midfield teams, and we'll start with Alpine. And yeah, Alpine, not really a surprise, but they look pretty competitive this weekend. Alonso, I think, definitely will be in the top 10. Esteban Ocon, not quite sure. He might struggle to get into the top 10 because I think the two Mercedes will definitely be in the top 10 in qualifying later. And then you've got, Alonso, Vettel, Gasly, Norris. So yeah, it'll be tough for Ocon to really get into the top 10. I mean, if he does, I'm not really going to be massively surprised about it because I thought Alpine coming into this Grand Prix would be pretty competitive. And Fernando Alonso is looking fantastic. All weekend has looked very quick. In the 2 practice sessions so far this weekend, he has been in the top 5 in both of them. So yeah, Fernando looking very quick. And I think he has, without a doubt, the ability to qualify in the top 6 on the grid. In the wet, though, yeah, maybe a top 5, top 4, but I think in the dry, I think definitely a top 6 is possible. I mean, in Monaco, only a couple of races ago, he could have qualified 5th if it wasn't for red flags and his own mistake at the end of qualifying. So, Alonso, as we've seen so far this season, in great form and has great pace, and it is continuing here in Canada, which is not a surprise because he's always been very competitive at the Canadian Grand Prix, no matter how slow the car he has been driving. Esteban Ocon also has been pretty competitive here in the past. He's been in the top 10 here in qualifying, the only 2 Canadian Grand Prix qualifying sessions he has done, and could have arguably got a podium here in 2017 had it not been for his teammate Sergio Perez holding him up. So, yeah, Alpine will be very good. Maybe not the quickest midfield team overall, but they will definitely be very strong. And as long as they can get a better starting position for the race than McLaren, who are their main rivals in the Constructors' Championship, then that would be pretty good for them. Now we'll go on to Alfa Romeo. Not really much to say about them. Seems as though, yet again, they are quite slow. I think it might have to do, again, with the street circuits with them. Valtteri Bottas having a very bad weekend. No running pretty much in practice too due to engine problems, I believe, with his car. Let me actually look to see what Bottas's exact problem was, because I didn't actually see for this stream. Let's have a look with Bottas. Well, all it says with Alfa Romeo is it was a technical issue, so yeah, not great there for Valtteri, but yeah, not a great weekend for him. I mean, Valtteri in the past year has had some very good speed here, so if they can get his car fixed and he has a decent setup, then I think Bottas can get a decent result considering the lack of pace Alfa Romeo do have. But yeah, they're not top 10 contenders. It's really, a big disappointment, Alfa Romeo. It really, really is, because after, Miami and Spain, where they were so competitive and got, I think, was it 6th at the Spanish Grand Prix, I was hoping that this team would be finishing in the top 5 of the championship this season, but they could very quickly slip back to 7th if they're not careful. So, yeah, not looking great for this team. And most likely, dry or wet, they're going to end up probably in between 13th and 17th on the grid, I'd imagine. Next up, Haas F1. And yeah, for them, I mean, they were 14th and 15th in practice 2. I will say Mick Schumacher's pace wasn't too bad in practice 2. If he can keep that up, then that would be a decent performance, considering that Mick has never raced here in Canada before. And obviously Kevin has before, and Kevin had a couple decent results here. So yeah, it would be a decent result if Mick could be, say, only one position behind his teammate. But what was I going to say? Yeah, Haas, they're also not very quick at all. They're probably heading for about the same result as Alfa Romeo, anywhere between 13th and maybe 18th on the grid. And their lack of upgrades to this car has been what has really killed their season, and they're not going to be bringing any upgrades to the car until the Hungarian Grand Prix, and then that will be their last upgrade or upgrade package for the season. So Haas F1 had heading for another disaster season in 2022. Now we'll go on to AlphaTauri. Obviously, we know Yuki Tsunoda has a grid penalty, and we'll start from the back of the grid for the race on Sunday, so I don't think Tsunoda will really do any running in qualifying today. He'll focus really in practice 3 on just race running. But for Pierre Gasly, he's looking pretty competitive. Not really a surprise that AlphaTauri are looking like possible top 10 contenders, because this track is not that much different from Baku in terms of what you need to be good at around this circuit compared to Baku. And Pierre is having, definitely, since Monaco, a much better season. So good to see that Pierre is more so back to what we saw in 2021 and 2020 as well. And I think Pierre will probably end up in the top 10 in qualifying today. I'd be very surprised if he ended up any lower than, say, 12th. I think that would be a disaster, really, for AlphaTauri. But yeah, I think he'll be probably in the top 10. He won't be super strong. I don't think, for example, he'll qualify 6th. I don't think that's going to happen. He was 6th, I think, in practice 2. Like I said, I don't think that's going to happen in qualifying today. But I think he'll be probably between 8th and 10th. And that would be a pretty good result for them as they seek to pull away from the teams below them in the Constructors' Championship. Now we'll go on to Aston Martin. No, we're not going to go to that. We've already been to that. Aston Martin also looking pretty competitive. And this man on screen, Sebastian Vettel, in a very, very good position. He was, I think, both practice sessions. Let me just check where he was in practice 1 quickly. He was. He was in the top 10 as well. So was Lance Stroll. So in both practice sessions, Sebastian Vettel in the top 10. And in practice 2, P4 he was here in Canada. Not necessarily a surprise he was so competitive yesterday, because he has always been very competitive here in Canada. But it is surprising that Aston Martin are showing this much more speed than they were, 2 months ago. 2 months ago, this team looked hopeless. Looked like they were going to finish probably last in the championship. Now they're tied for 8th in the championship, and they look as though they could make some good progress up towards 7th in the championship, being AlphaTauri. So, yeah, looking absolutely fantastic for the Aston Martin team. And Sebastian Vettel, like I said, will be in the top 10, dry or wet. If he can finish in the top 6 in qualifying, that would be, I think, pretty much the best he could do. Like I said, I do expect Mercedes to be stronger, and I still think Fernando Alonso will be pretty strong in the Alpine as well. So, yeah, I think if he can get into the top 6 in qualifying, that's pretty much the best he can do. And he's probably, for this weekend, whether dry or wet heading, for a pretty good race result as well. So, good to see Sebastian doing well. Lance Stroll didn't do great in practice 2, but in practice 1 was actually quicker than Vettel. So, maybe there is potential there for Stroll to, to have a good qualifying session or weekend in general. Obviously, the last time we raced here in Canada, he finished 9th at his home Grand Prix, and him having a grandstand at the track this weekend, he does have definitely a big crowd willing him on. And given how quick the Aston Martin is, he could get Stroll a decent result this weekend, and hopefully in qualifying can at least be on the fringes of the top 10. But with Sebastian Vettel, let me quickly get into some stats to do with him with qualifying, because his stats and his record in qualifying at the Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve is very, very impressive. So, here you go. Sebastian Vettel has 5 pole positions at the Canadian Grand Prix from 2011, 2012, 2013, 2018, and 2019. And also, this is a great stat, Vettel has qualified inside the top 3 at every Canadian Grand Prix since 2010, except for 2015. And the only reason he didn't qualify in the top 3 that weekend, when I think he was expected to, given the car he was in, was because he had an engine problem in qualifying 1 and had to start from 17th. He still came through to finish in 5th, by the way. So, yeah, around this track, Vettel is an absolute god. 5 pole positions here. That's only, 1 less than Lewis Hamilton, and we all, we all talk about how great Lewis has been here in Canada. So watch out for Sebastian Vettel, obviously in great form and coming to a track that he loves very, very much. And finally, and very quickly, we'll go on to the Williams team. If it does rain, then Alex Albon probably could gain a couple positions up the order, but, it's going to be a struggle for him to get into Q2. The Williams was shockingly slow, I have to say, in practice 2. I know it's only a short lap, but they were way behind where they should be, around this type of lap. Williams looking very, very slow. They are going to start bringing some upgrades over the next few races, so maybe they'll improve their pace. Hopefully they do, because it's disappointing to see, obviously, them still very, very poor. But, for this weekend, I don't really expect much from Williams, unless we get, a proper race of attrition tomorrow, and maybe Williams then could grab a point. Hopefully, Nicholas Latifi at his home Grand Prix can get a decent, result, but most likely he'll be starting. He won't be starting from the back of the grid for the race on Sunday, but he'll probably qualify last of all the people who that do a run in qualifying. But there you go. That's all the teams, and I'll come back to you guys in the chat to see what you guys have to say regarding the teams that I have talked about. Let me just find a good place to start reading comments. Appa Matt Hassan asks, what time is FP3? FP3 starts in an hour and a half, and my watch along for it starts in an hour and 15 minutes. So, yeah, not long. And then about, an hour's long session, and then about a 2-hour wait until I start qualifying. Hopefully, sorry about my chair noise, by the way. Hopefully, it doesn't rain too hard, because I don't want, long delays to qualifying that we've had in the past with, with bad weather. Let's see if I can find some other comments here. Quick. Dane asks, what do you think of Seb right now? Because I remember Eddie Irvine saying Seb is overrated in 2018. I mean, look, Sebastian is performing very well right now. And I've always said Sebastian is a very good driver. I just think, yes, he's a 4-time world champion, has, a lot of race wins. I get that. But the reason I don't say he's an all-time great in Formula 1, which I still stand by the way, it's a pretty, I say, contested argument, but I would still stand by that comment. The reason I do is because, yes, he's won 4 world championships, but look at the context behind that. 2 of them, he was still great in those seasons, in the 2 seasons where he utterly dominated, 2011 and 2013, but he did have a pretty clear car advantage over his closest rivals, being Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, maybe you could say Kimi Räikkönen to a certain extent in 2013. I know Mark Webber was a close rival in 2010, but really and 2012 to a certain extent, but really for the majority of that dominance, Vettel was the clear number 1. And yeah, credit to him for winning in 2010 and 2012 especially. But I think the problem with Sebastian Vettel's career, when you look back at it, is people look at, the stats and think, well, that objectively he has to be an all-time great because he has 4 world championships. And does he have, 51 wins? I think he has. Sebastian is in his F1 career. But the problem is, people who look at that, they don't look at the context behind his stats, which is very important. I would say, and I think I've said this before, I think Sebastian Vettel, in terms of how he's compared to the fellow drivers, the great drivers in his era, is very similar to me with Nelson Piquet back in the 1980s, where Nelson Piquet, people forget, obviously Ayrton Senna, died a lot sooner than, his F1 career would have ended. But Nelson Piquet won the same amount of world championships as Ayrton Senna, yet everybody thinks Senna is miles better than Nelson Piquet ever was. And the reason is because of the context behind Nelson Piquet's success. Piquet's first world championship, the competition wasn't great for him that year. He did have stiff competition still, but it wasn't, in terms of who he was fighting against, it wasn't the greatest competition in the world. Certainly not as great as he faced later in his career. 1983 for him was a pretty good championship because there was a bit stronger competition that year. I think against the 2 Renaults, one of them being Alain Prost. So, the competition that year was pretty good as well. I think maybe Keke Rosberg was fighting for that championship as well. And obviously, Keke won in 1982. And then, when Piquet won in 1987, Williams had by far the best car. And also, Nigel Mansell had a crash in, I think, practice at Suzuka, the first time they ever raced there, which ended up putting him out of the race. And that meant that Piquet won the championship. So, I think, again, with Vettel and Piquet, they are very similar in how they will be remembered, or they should be remembered, in comparison to their fellow greats in the same era. Because, like I said, Piquet, more championships than Mansell, the same as Senna, only 1 behind Prost. You'd think that people would rate Piquet as this amazing driver, but people don't really talk about Nelson Piquet. I'm not going to say that people don't talk about Sebastian Vettel, but I think it's similar, Vettel to Piquet, in that despite the success, if you look at the context behind it, it's not as great as it looks. It's still great, obviously. I'm not going to pretend that his success is, got an asterisk next to it or, something like that. But if you compare his success to Lewis Hamilton, for example, obviously Lewis has 3 more world championships than him, but the only seasons where Lewis Hamilton didn't have proper competition were, 2019 and 2020. So, if you were to knock off 2 championships there for Hamilton, that's still 5 titles where he won when he had pretty stiff competition, when Sebastian had pretty stiff competition for only 2 of his 4. So, yeah, I think when you compare to the other great drivers of this era and of the past, I don't think Sebastian's career goes down as actually as great as it maybe seems. Like I said, the stats are great, but you'd have to look at the context behind them, which I think a lot of people don't do. Chaz, do you think if Alonso didn't have bad luck in the first couple of races this year, do you think he would have been ahead of Hamilton in the Drivers' Championship? No, I don't think he would. But I think he would be probably ahead of Bottas in 8th. So he wouldn't be too far behind with Fernando. Jeff Thomas asks, if billionaire sons are 0.0000035% of the world's population, what are the chances that Latifi and Stroll Mazepin represent 15% of the world's best 20 drivers? Well, that right there sums up the problem with Formula 1, doesn't it? It's too much about money. And it is, at the end of the day, that's the reality. Formula 1 is mostly about money, but it's too much about that at the end of the day. And F1 is still the most elitist competition on the planet. John Hawking says, Nigel Mansell, great driver, but most boring voice ever. Yeah, not great. Let's see if I can find some other comments here quick. Gary Grant says, millions of more people would be F1 followers if it was live. They could show commercials off to the side like the Indy 500. It could pay for the broadcast. And also says, Gary, yes, football and soccer is the most watched around the world, and it's televised. Not the crap where they show the 7 minutes highlights after the F1 race. Well, that's on YouTube. They do televise F1. F1 is televised around the world. F1 is never going to be as popular as football. And the reason is, it's not because football is necessarily more exciting than motorsport. It's because football is way more accessible to everyone than motorsport is. In motorsport, you have to be at least a middle class earner. You cannot be working class and get involved in motorsport, I'm afraid. Yeah. With football, you can be literally broke and still make a career out of football. That's the key difference between football and F1, and well, football and motorsport, and why football is more popular, because, you know, it touches everyone rather than just the middle class or the elite in terms of who can get involved. And I know people might not want to hear that and might point to examples like Lewis Hamilton, but those are outliers. Those aren't good examples. Jeff Thomas says, if Ferrari had the consistency of this porn bot, they'd be invincible. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what more to say about it. Rotten Bastard says, F1 Driver Championship is rather a muddy subject because the performance of the cars are so far apart. Is it the car or is it the driver that is great? At the end of the day, I mean, Murray Walker used to put it in a very great way, where at the end of the day, it's an equal thing. It's, you know, you've got to have the car, but then you've got to have the driver basically to finish off the job. Which in most cases in Formula 1 history is the case with, who's won the championship. You have to have, in most cases, the best car on the grid if you're going to win the championship, and then have a great driver behind the wheel, or at least a very good one. That's how you win championships. You can win it with, say, the second quickest car, maybe at the worst, the third quickest car on the grid, but that's very rare. Normally, you have to have one of the 2 best cars on the grid to be a world champion. But yeah, I think when you look at, if you look at every world champion, you've got to look at how good the car was to really get a good understanding of how great the driver is. I mean, for example, back in the day, Jim Clark was amazing, I mean, his win percentage, considering there wasn't that many races back in the day, was amazing. But he did have, for most of his F1 career, or at least half of it, the best car on the grid. Now, he was still a great driver because some of the gaps he would win races by and the amount of wins he got, and again, how dominant he was in that car, still puts him as a great driver. And obviously, he still had a few years left before he sadly died in, was it 1968, I think it was? And yeah, I think Jim Clark probably would have raced for another 5-6 years in F1 had it not been for his sad death. But yeah, you've got to look at, like I said, you've got to look at how quick the car was in comparison to the competition to really see how great the driver was. I think another great example of this is Mika Hakkinen in 98 and 99. Now, Hakkinen was a very good driver. I wouldn't say an all-time great driver. He wasn't that good. But yeah, he was very good. I mean, he put up some very good fights against Michael Schumacher. But at the end of the day, if you look at those years in 98 and 99, Hakkinen should have wrapped up both championships relatively easily, as McLaren were miles quicker than Ferrari in both years. Yet he only won the championship, both championships, on the final race of the season. So yeah, I think that proves that Hakkinen, yeah, good driver, very, very quick. In qualifying especially, he was an absolute demon in qualifying. But wasn't... I mean, Michael Schumacher and Hakkinen, Mika Hakkinen, they had great battles in that. And they did have a very good rivalry. But Michael was definitely much better than Mika Hakkinen, considering that in those years they were fighting, Michael had a much slower car a lot of the time. Gary Grant says, by the way, I love CHD review. Thank you very much for that. McLaren F1 races. Chazzy, you haven't made it on YouTube unless you get sex ads, mate. True. I think I'll probably read a couple more comments and then I'll get to the end of the stream because obviously I've got to go live in another hour. The practice 3 watch along, so I may as well just come to on a couple comments here. Darth Snarf makes a good point. Football, you need a ball and a foot. That's about it. Well, that is true, but it's again, it does come down to accessibility, affordability, and the ease of being able to access the sport. And obviously, footballs don't cost that much. It's not like you can just buy a, Formula Ford car to go driving around Silverstone. Nick161. I'll probably end on this comment who says, thanks for the preview. I am new to Formula 1 and I love listening to people talking in depth about the sport. I found it really helpful. No problem. And hopefully you'll be back for more later this weekend and later in the season as well. And by the way, guys, we have an hour and 20 minutes until practice 3. And I'm going to come now to the end of this string. It's been going for about an hour and 45 minutes almost for this qualifying preview. Thank you guys for coming along. And like I said, make sure to join me later tonight for the practice 3 watch along at 5:45 p.m. UK time. So that's an hour from now. And then the qualifying watch along will be at 8:30 p.m. UK time. Make sure to join me for those streams later this evening. And then I'll be live tomorrow with a race preview at 4 p.m. UK time. That's 3 hours before the race starts. And then I will be live half an hour before the race starts with the race watch along. And then I'll be doing the race watch along and then going straight into the race reaction as a part of the race watch along. So don't forget to come along to those streams. And as well, remember, I will be doing an in-depth review of the key incidents from the Grand Prix on Sunday on Monday night at 8 p.m. UK time. So, yeah, make sure, come along to all those streams. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Don't forget to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 and join my Discord server, link below in the description. But guys, until my practice 3 watch along in an hour's time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.